It didn't hit record yet. Hi, you beautiful stars. Courtney here, stars of the stars of the morning light. We were talking so much backstage, I didn't even know what was going on. So we have lovely Zach here again with Allied in Alchemy. Oh, let's catch my breath. Okay. So the record button, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, you beautiful stars, kind of popped in unexpectedly. I didn't know it was working. So we were talking and then all of a sudden it showed up. That's why I was a little jumbled. Oh, so how are you all doing on this wonderful night? Zach, how are you doing, my dear?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on again, Courtney. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so I will say I have now interviewed you. Well, this is the third time, but in different ways. And the last one, it was good. It was great. It's here. You guys can watch it. But I know that you've kind of added to it, put a spin to things, kind of shared more. And I know with the last event that we did for New Earth Energy Market, your presentation was the talk of the day. I mean, everybody came up to me and said, oh my goodness, what Zach's got going on, Allied in Alchemy. Oh my goodness. And I just kept going, okay, cool. So if you all don't know what I'm talking about, Zach does attend and has a booth at our holistic fair, New Earth Energy Market, April 29th, Ringgold, Georgia. All the information will be below. I have that little sign there by me in case I'm interviewing people for it. So Zach, you know what? Lay it on us. We know that you start with the emotion code. Now you're doing your own thing. Why don't you just restart from the beginning and just lay it on us of what Allied in Alchemy is?
Yeah, thank you again, Courtney. So Allied in Alchemy is my healing company. I am emotion code certified. And then I also developed, like you said, my own system that dives deeper into the subconscious. And that is called shadow cycle healing, because I believe there are these subconscious cycles that influence our life and have an impact on almost all of our daily interactions, that we're really unaware of their influence over us. And I came to this conclusion when I realized shortly after I became emotion code certified, I realized while it's beneficial to release the body of these detrimental, unresolved emotions, and that they do cause pain within themselves, that they're not the true source or the root of our problem, and that really they're just a signal, an alarm bell going off, letting us know that something's wrong. So if that alarm bell is going off, there's got to be something in deeper within that's triggering that alarm. So that's when I started delving into, well, what are the other components of the subconscious mind, and ultimately uncovered a sequence that, like I said, occurs in a cyclical pattern, a shadow cycle, shadow just being another term for the subconscious, that influences us. And then once I knew that pattern, then I figured out a way to address it energetically and test it out with muscle testing, talking to the subconscious and the body directly.
Excellent. Okay, so before we get into this, wow, you just said a lot of stuff. And I think that was the first time I heard you actually say that you use the term shadow to basically refer to the subconscious, with the name of the program or the healing modality. That I love that, because everybody hears the term shadow work, when really it is a lot of subconscious stuff.
Exactly, yes. I think Dr. Carl Jung was the first one to popularize, or at least in the Western world, the correlation of the word shadow in place of subconscious. They're really, to me, they're one and the same thing. So, so yeah.
So wait, so I guess as we go along and you're gonna have to go through these levels and go through all this stuff. Because so you're telling me, if I'm understanding correctly, that you're healing the subconscious, or is the subconscious releasing something? I guess tell us, if I was a client and or I called you and I said, hey, I'm interested in this service, kind of bring me from start to finish, but you can embellish and really go into it here as to what this really looks like.
Yeah, that's a great question, Courtney. So, emotion code, like I said, it deals with strictly emotions. We have these experiences and we have emotional reactions to these experiences. And if we don't process those emotions in a healthy way, they can become trapped or unresolved within the body. Their energy is just like everything else, their frequency, and those frequencies can become stuck in us, or we're attached to them, carrying them. And emotion code seeks out those emotions and helps you release them. And similarly, shadow cycle healing delves deeper than just emotions. And so you're going to still hit on emotions because that's an important component, but you're also going to work on ego patterns, which most people just call the ego. We work on limiting beliefs, which are really just restrictive beliefs founded through a fearful experience. And then core voids, which are really just mental wounds that are, in my opinion, the root of our emotional trauma. So that when we experience something painful or discomfort, if it's intense enough or threatening enough to the person, they're going to develop that wound, that core void, just like you would if you rubbed your arm hard enough, against a brick wall or something. There's gonna be some abrasions there. There's gonna be something left behind. And so to say what shadow cycle healing does, the way I describe it is ultimately these energies get stored within us. They're stored as energy, but if you want to put words to them, they're sort of like we're carrying around memories of the past with us all the time. And that's when you think about the terms emotional baggage, or people are anchored to their past. They can't move beyond something once it's happened. People say, well, they were never the same after that occurred. Well, that's because you've got these ties to things in the past that you haven't released, because you're literally carrying them around in your tissues, issues in your tissues, right? And what's stored in the mind is ultimately stored within the body, because science likes to separate out and segregate the mind and body, but they're really one unit. And so what's in one is in the other. So where I was going with this was, the ultimate goal is to heal it, but we heal it through acknowledgement and integration of these energies. For example, a lot of people can't tell you, if you walked up to somebody on the street and said, hey, tell me 5 limiting beliefs that you carry. A lot of people may not even know what a limiting belief is, let alone be able to identify it and put words to it. It's something that's buried deep within our psyche that is formed from a painful or discomfort or fearful experience. And That's the beauty of this system, is you don't have to be able to come to me and say, hey, my limiting belief is, rich people are bad. And, you don't have to be that specific. We can just test it out and be able to say, hey, this is the limiting belief that we uncovered, let's address it now that we know exactly what it is. So yes, the goal of a session is to heal one shadow cycle, and that relieves you of this restrictive pattern in your life. And it ultimately, I believe, buys you more peace, because these core voids, limiting beliefs, ego patterns, our compensation patterns, and all these negative emotions are the ones that become unresolved. It's all chaos. And so when you can just let go of this chaos and be done with it, and you've accepted it for what it is and just letting it be, now you're free to be at more ease with life.
Zach, I want to say, it's interesting because you said it. You said, consciousness is frequency. And we say that a lot here, or that the frequency of the subconscious. I say that a lot here, that consciousness is frequency, but I think people forget that also means subconscious, conscious and subconscious. So
Yes.
all that you have in your subconscious is a part of your frequency as well. Before we go any further, you have now said like core void, all this stuff. Start breaking down maybe the actual logistics as to what these terms that you're saying mean, maybe in the subconscious way.
Sure, yeah. But let me touch on your comment right before that. So I heard it once on a podcast. They related the frequency of consciousness to like a radio dial. And if you're on 109.7, then you can't tune into 102.5 radio station. And it's interesting. The other thing that's sort of related to that, and I think I also heard this on a podcast, is they said, like, if your conscious frequency resonates at, I'm okay with myself, but then your subconscious frequency is at the frequency of, I don't really like myself, or I'm not a good person, or something like that. Well, the reality of your experience and what you express through yourself and experience through life is going to be somewhere in the middle between those two, where those two frequencies meet. And that's what a lot of people don't realize, is how powerful the subconscious mind is. I believe, like, ultimately every interaction and everything you experience, whether it be with yourself, just talking to yourself while you're driving in the car, or whether it be a conversation with a friend or a job interview or whatever, your subconscious mind is playing a part in that, whether you know it or not. To give you just a couple insights into the power of the subconscious mind, Dr. Bruce Lipton and Dr. Joe Dispenza they're both best-selling authors, and they both independently concluded that roughly 95% of your daily actions are memorized patterns and subconscious programs, as they call them. So it's way more powerful than we think. To give you another example with numbers, is I Googled this. I forget where I found it, but you can find it on the internet. So when we're moving around and going about our day, we're taking in all this sensory information. Our body is constantly giving our brain feedback to keep, it's keeping me upright in my seat right now. It's keeping me breathing without me having to think about it, my heart beating, and so on. So we're taking in all this sensory information, and they've proven now that the subconscious mind processes somewhere around 11 million bits of information per second. Okay. So that's a ton of sensory information. So out of this 11 million bits that's coming in the brain, or I should say your brain processes 11 million bits. Out of this 11 million bits, your conscious mind only processes 50. So
Yeah.
50 bits compared to 11 million. That's a huge difference in power and capacity when you compare the consciousness to the subconsciousness. So to answer your question about the system, so my system revolves around the subconscious mind. And as I said before, I realized that emotions are really just a signal. They're an indicator from the body to our mind, letting us know where we're at on our track. Well, if they're the signal, if they're the alarm, then there's something triggering that. So I'm going to start at the base layer. And let me just preface this with one thing. And a lot of other people have talked about this. This really wasn't my idea, but it really rang true with me, and it still does. And it makes sense to me in a logical manner. Your subconscious mind is really geared towards one thing, and that thing, its primary objective is to keep you alive. If it can keep you alive for another second, another minute, another day, another week, that's what it wants to do. It's like this safety mechanism in the body. And it goes to extreme lengths at times to do so. So what ends up happening is when we experience something that's painful, that's discomfort, that's threatening, okay, that's against my safety, that's threatening to us. And I don't know everything about this. And so I'll just tell you what I do know, I guess. If the experience is intense enough and we feel, I guess, if we feel enough pain around it, we want to avoid that in the future. And that ends up becoming that wound that I talked about, that I call a core void. I call it a core void because I believe it's at the core of our issues, and void because it's birthed out of fear, and it is therefore void of life. And so that core void, which is birthed out of an experience of pain and discomfort, like I said, our mind is geared towards protecting us. So it feels that and it says, I don't want to experience that again. So it looks around and it places blame on some aspect of the environment that it feels inflicted that pain or discomfort. And in doing so, that becomes a limiting belief then. Like I said, a limiting belief is a restrictive belief founded in fear, okay? And so now that we've picked out something in our environment that hurt us, that did us harm, that threatened us, now we want to, again, we want to avoid that in the future. So we're going to develop compensation patterns, which are ego patterns. So these ego patterns really serve one of two purposes: to either bring in more love and affection and security, or to push away more pain and harm and discomfort. And they're really something that we launch into on autopilot without knowing it when we get triggered, because triggering is when something in our external environment comes close to touching that core void inside. So in that triggering, we launch into the protective mechanisms to prevent that pain and discomfort. So I feel like I was missing something there, limiting beliefs, but we can come back to it. So now we're at the third layer, right? We've covered core voids, which are birthed out of pain and discomfort. And from there, we place blame on something. That's what I was missing. We're either going to blame ourselves, someone else, or the circumstance altogether. We're gonna place blame on something and say that thing over there was wrong because it made me feel hurt. You know, it threatened my experience. So then we go into an ego pattern, because the ego pattern says, well, from now on, I'm going to do A, B, C, and D whenever I experience this again, or whenever I come close to experiencing this again, and that will keep me safe. And so these are the ego patterns, like I said, are the compensation patterns. Well, because we're compensating, we're not being authentic. We're not interacting authentically with ourselves, with everyone else, with our environment. We're being something that we think we need to be safe. Okay. We're telling ourselves, well, if I'm a tough guy from now on and I don't let anyone see my pain, then they can't hurt me anymore. You know, we sell ourselves on these ideas. And that's the other thing is the ego patterns are not only action patterns, they're also thought patterns that reinforce future actions. So, again, because we're not acting authentically and we're not being true to ourselves, we end up producing negative emotions from these ego patterns. And negative emotions, like I said, are the emotions that are prone to become unresolved or stuck emotions within the body. And so that's the chain and the sequence that I basically uncovered or discovered. And once I knew that, I said, well, now I just need to know how to address each of these layers. And if you address these layers, then you eliminate the cycle, and then that cycle is no longer influencing you in your life, and you've gained more freedom. You've gained a greater capacity to experience life because you're not weighed down by this mental burden that was, like I said, hindering you or keeping you tied to your past, however you want to say it.
Zach, so let me just clarify for people if I'm taking everything in right. We have a core void from some kind of trauma. Let's say the word trauma, whatever it might have been. Then that creates the limiting beliefs. Is that where we then put blame on something?
That's exactly what a limiting belief is, yes.
Yes, like, right, for us versus them, or it was because of this, so don't do that, right. Don't ever do that ever again. Right. And then the ego comes into play. That I understood completely, actually, because wow, that's exactly what that is. And then there's the emotions. So I'm just repeating all this because it's fascinating to think, because we just walk around feeling emotions. We just walk around getting triggered. We just walk around with our egos talking to egos. That's what we do as humans, not knowing it all comes from this cycle, this building on top of it itself. I have to ask, so in an average person, I'm going to assume there can be lots of these core voids that created these emotions and all the in between, limiting beliefs and, you know, the compensation of the ego. And I'm assuming in the average human, there's a lot.
Yeah, and that's a great question. I've never tested on how many maybe the average person carries around. I guess it's always been something that's been in the back of my head and I've never done it. But yeah, I can confirm that we all have multiple core voids, these core voids give rise to, multiple shadow cycles. I've found that when I get the best results is when most issues have what I call a shadow paradigm, which is a paradigm is just a way of thinking. And a shadow paradigm is 3 shadow cycles together related to one issue. So if you came and said, hey, I've got right knee pain and I want to, have reduced pain in my knee, most often you're going to have 3 shadow cycles related to that one thing, which is a shadow paradigm. And so we all have a lot of these. I know Dr. Bradley Nelson, the author of the Emotion Code, he says that the average person carries, I believe it was like 250 unresolved emotions. So it's a fair amount. I've been doing this work on myself for a while, and I've probably strictly shadow cycle healing, I've probably healed, I would say, at least 8 shadow cycles from myself. Over the course, I've been doing this since 2020. So yeah, it can be more than you think. And like I said, the subconscious is like 2,000 times the horsepower of the conscious mind. So there can be a lot in there that you're just not aware of.
Zach, before we get even further into this, like, well, then how do you get into our subconscious? Will you tell us, because you just mentioned that you also use this on yourself. Can you tell us a bit of your backstory to this? Like, we know, okay, so you already said you were certified in emotion code, but this is its whole, like, kind of its own thing. What is some of your backstory and how did this help you?
So that's an excellent question. So I started my natural health journey in 2010, which was interesting because I developed shadow cycle healing in 2020, 10 years later, almost to the date. So in 2010, I got really sick, GI issues. Nobody could figure out what was going on. Pretty much everything I ate went straight through me. I was losing weight like crazy. And long story short is, at the height of it, I landed myself in the hospital for a week. I was 28 years old at the time. At one point, I was so dehydrated that I essentially lost consciousness and almost didn't come back. But through this experience, the modern medical system turned me away. In the end, I went home slightly healthier than when I went into the hospital with what I felt was a blanket diagnosis. And so because of that, I knew that if I didn't change something in a really short time, I was going to end up back in the same boat and where I didn't want to be. And so I sought out alternative medicine, and I have no tests to prove it other than muscle testing, but I believe what was inflicting me at the time was intestinal parasites. And through the help of a naturopath, I healed myself of that. And then it sent me on this journey, this long journey to refine my diet. First of all, I started researching anti-parasitic foods and stuff. And I was still very fearful at that time too, and got, a little bit of like germophobic because, because parasites and germs are real close. And so, but I slowly grew out of that as I went along. But to sort of fast forward to the energy side of it, is slowly over time, I grew in my exposure to alternative medicine and energy medicine. And in 2019, I read the book Emotion Code, and this was after I guess I can't even tell you when I was first exposed to emotion code. And and at first my aunt brought it up to me, and I really wasn't even open-minded enough at the time. I thought she released like one or two emotions from me just because she was reading the book and thought it was fun. And I just kind of went along with it, and I was like, yeah, I don't really know about this stuff, but whatever, you can push on my arm a little bit. And so I really didn't give it a lot of credit at the time. But then a few years later, I was just kind of struggling with the stresses of life, and wasn't as happy and as fulfilled as I knew it could be. And somehow through Facebook, my wife connected me with someone who was doing emotion code, and I did phone sessions with her off and on for maybe every 2 months for the course of at least 2 years. And at first it didn't really seem to be doing a lot, but then when I would look back and reflect on who I was at the time and who I am now, I could tell the difference. And so I slowly became a believer in it. And then, like I said, in 2019, I got interested in enough that I was like, I'm going to get the book and read it for myself. And so I read the book through twice, and it really resonated with me. And so then I ended up going to a live conference where they taught you the emotion code and you could become certified. And so I did that. And then, like I said, then I started delving deeper into the subconscious mind and developed shadow cycle healing. But overall, between the two modalities, and I really don't know any other way to say it. The best way I can say it is it gains you more peace. It gains you more capacity in the end to experience life unbiasedly and neutrally. And when you do so, when you're not weighed down by your mental burden, then it opens up energy and abilities to respond to life then. Because the old me, just to give you a personal example, I guess, is the old me would very easily become overwhelmed with life and depressed, and enough things would pile up, or I would perceive enough things as quote unquote wrong, and I would just collapse under the weight of it and wouldn't be able to respond to life. And I would just literally have to go through this depressiveness or sadness for a while until I processed it and come out the other side again. Well, now I found myself being able to handle more stressors, and I still recognize some things as stressors, but I'm not getting tripped up on them as much. I'm able to go, okay, yeah, that sucks, but what else can we do here? Or can I focus on something else? Because now I have the ability to respond to life differently than I did before. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and you had said that when you remove at least one of these cycles, maybe three if it's they kind of maybe coincide together, you had said that because of how the ego feels like it needs to respond and compensate, that we're actually not living our authentic self. And I
Right.
find it interesting because I mean, in today's world, and even I say it, be your authentic self, everybody says it. How much is that actually, is it true then? For just the general population, all of us just walking around. And so when you're talking about that, Zach, that's what I'm thinking. Like our true authentic self can handle life a whole lot easier, can handle this, can make decisions, and use reason and rational and logic and all these wonderful, even creative and imaginative sides that are within us, but are obviously clouded by the compensating ego. So when you were talking there, I thought of that. I said, yeah, because more and more you do it, more of Zach, more of your clients, the more the true Zach is being represented. The true Zach is living his life. So wow, okay. That sounds good. Everybody, that sounds really good. So how do we get there? And you have said now, what is it called? Muscle testing. Can you explain that to me?
Yes.
I never knew what that was until I met somebody in like 2019. I was like, what are you doing?
So yeah, muscle testing, it's scientific term, it's called applied kinesiology. Like the general term is just muscle testing. The way I explain it, so muscle testing is used in emotion code as well as other modalities. I loved it so much I incorporated it into shadow cycle healing because it's an easy way to tap into the subconscious or the body. Remember, they're one unit, and get answers. But the way I describe it to people that works or the way it works, excuse me, is you can muscle test almost any joint in the body. And what you're doing is you're looking for the body's response to a statement that is made. And I believe the body resonates with two things, love and truth, although those are subjective. So something that is true for you may not be true for me. So you might get different responses there. And the body does not resonate with fear and falsehoods. So what ends up happening is if you say something and then test the body to see its response, if you say something that's false to the body or that would harm that person, then you're going to get a negative response in the testing. The muscles are not going to be strong. It's going to weaken you. So, and likewise, if you were to say a statement of truth or something of loving, something that's affirming or uplifting to that person, something that's empowering, those things empower you, then you're going to get a strong response. You're going to get an energized charge out of the body. And so by muscle testing, then you say a statement, you gauge the response, whether it's strong or weak, and then you know, okay, that's the body saying yes to that statement, or that's the body saying no, it doesn't like that statement. And so through that, then you can use charts. Emotion codes uses an emotion chart. Shadow cycle healing uses several different charts, but through that, you can specify things. You can narrow things down to, okay, it's this limiting belief, not that limiting belief. You can say, okay, this energy is, you can classify the energy. You can say, okay, this energy is prenatal, where this energy is from when you were 6 years old. You know, so that's how you use the muscle testing to figure out what's going on in the body. The other beautiful thing about muscle testing is because you're utilizing the power of the subconscious mind or the body, the person doesn't need to be consciously aware of this stuff to begin with. Like I said, they don't have to come in and be able to say, well, my ego patterns are X, Y, and Z. Let's please address those. You can feel it out as you go, and the body knows this stuff because it's the one hanging on to this stuff for us. So, and I say for us loosely, it's not for our benefit, it's just because we're not letting it go. I'm trying to remember what I was saying there. So because the body is holding on to this stuff, it knows intuitively what's holding us back, what's restricting us, and it knows what we can handle at the time. So when you come in for a session, if there's some deep, dark skeleton in the back of the closet that you're not ready to face just yet, the body isn't going to bring that up. It's not going to shock you and say, hey, look at this thing, you know, let's get over this so we can move on. It knows that you don't have the capacity to address it. So it brings up what you are ready to deal with. So in that sense, we're defaulting to what's best for you by asking the subconscious and the body what needs to be worked on at the time. So while we are sort of steering the ship and directing the session towards the goal of eliminating a shadow cycle or healing one, we're letting the body guide us and tell us how to go about doing so. And so it's this neat balance of we're playing an active role, but yet we're surrendering to the process as it happens.
Wow. Yeah. And wow. Zach, you said that as if like the body will also kind of say yes and no to get down to those more the specifics, from the ego to the limiting beliefs. I mean, you can, like you said, you can start pinpointing, okay, this was around when you were around 6 years old. This is based out of this. This is based out of that. That when you're working with someone, I'm sure it draws a very clear picture. And there's so many layers to it that to just be able to identify things that way and to see, oh my goodness, I have been carrying this limited belief since I was 6 years old, or I've been doing this, or my ego is like that's my true ego. That it must be fascinating for the people that you're working with because oftentimes they might not know that, yeah, this is really all that's in you. And then if the body knows and the subconscious knows that it's willing to be let out, release, how many times, I mean, I could just see the awe and the shock on people. That's not a good word, but the awe of, I never knew I had such limiting beliefs. I never knew that belief was also affecting all these other areas of my life, right? It's got to be fascinating.
Yeah, it is pretty interesting. And it varies from session to session. Sometimes you'll do a session and it will be so crystal clear how these pieces line up and integrate with one another, that it's just, once you uncover it, it's plain as day. And then there are other sessions where the connections seem a little more vague, or maybe it doesn't quite add up rationally 100%. But it's interesting. And sometimes people will come in and will test something out and they'll say, I knew that was connected to that, you know, and, you know, because deep inside, they knew that one thing was connected to something that was hindering them. And so that's neat to see. And then other times there's an element of surprise at what's uncovered. But yeah, it's interesting. And I don't know why something you said triggered this when you're talking about the limiting beliefs. I did one session with a lady. It's weird how the different cycles are weighted for different people too. Some people may be heavier in other components than another. Or some people may just have a cycle that has a ton of components to it, where and the same person, it just varies from cycle to cycle too. Another person may have a shadow cycle or the same person, I should say, may have a shadow cycle that has very little components. I know I did a session with a lady once where it took 2 sessions to get through one shadow cycle. Normally you can do one shadow cycle during one session. Every once in a while you can't. But it took 2 sessions to get through her one shadow cycle just because she had so many limiting beliefs in it.
Oh, wow.
And that was a really a learning thing for me. She had, I forget the number, but it was, I mean, like I would say at least over 12 different limiting beliefs in one shadow cycle, which is a lot. Normally you might have 3 or 4 are the average number of limiting beliefs per cycle. So, and that's the thing. So because we're all individuals and because we all process things differently and we all have different experiences, it ends up adding up to different shadow cycles, which again sort of points to the beauty of deferring to the body and or the subconscious is I'm not going in there and saying, okay, let's get rid of, every single session, let's get rid of 5 beliefs, let's get rid of 3 core voids, let's do this. We're not doing that. We're letting the body say, hey, this is the thing that's holding me back. Hey, this is the thing that if we can integrate this, I'll be better off moving ahead.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, it gives the power back to the authentic self that's trying to say, yes, let's do this. And the body, I love that. Um, so you've been using the word to integrate or release these things, like for somebody that does have a lot of limiting beliefs, or because what I'm thinking is you're right. If we just ask somebody on the street right now, hey, give me your top 3 limited beliefs, they what would they say? We all maybe have a general 2 that we're like, yeah, I got that problem, but to really go in, so you're identifying it, but then you're using words like integrate it or release. What is the outcome look like, or what do people take away? Like how are we doing that? I mean, what's the outcome?
So yeah, so the process, I can't give you all the details, of course.
Yeah, of course.
The process is basically, so we test out the components. I have specific words that I use for the specific components, because each component is different. You're going to address it in a specific way. So we identify the components. We use specific words to release them. The integration part is really just the conscious acknowledgement of these things, of the event itself, whatever led to the creation of all this. And then, so once we know enough about a component, then we can address it energetically by doing a release. You're just doing the release by putting the energy into the governing meridian running down the spine, from neck to waistline. And when you input that energy into the body, because you're doing it in the governing meridian, it's going to disperse throughout the whole body, and it's going to release those energies. Afterwards, you do a muscle test just to double check your work, make sure that the component, whatever it is, whether it be a limiting belief, an ego pattern, was resolved, was released. When we get into the limiting beliefs, it gets a little more interactive, because when I first started doing this, I would have people, we would feel out the limiting belief and figure out exactly what it was verbiage wise. And then we would create the reverse of that, or the positive aspect of that. And I would basically empower the person, or input an empowering belief into the person. And I say I loosely because I'm just guiding them. They're the ones, coming up with all this stuff and ultimately willing it to happen to themselves. But the interesting thing is why I sort of started on this is as I've gone along, I've learned that it's not the best option to install a empowering belief, because beliefs are ultimately clouded with doubt, and they're really sort of based in insecurity if you really think about it. And so now what I do is we negate the limiting belief altogether, and then we put in a knowing. We come up with a knowing. If you know something, you know it to be true. A knowing is way more powerful than a belief is, even a positive belief. Because if I believe, I'm trying to think of an example here, but maybe, I don't know, maybe I don't need to come up with
Well,
one.
if you know, like, let's say you're releasing something that it's like, you're always thinking that the shoe is going to drop, or, the other shoe, right? That's a limiting belief. But if you bring in the knowing of all is well.
Yeah.
Period. We're going with there, because beautiful stars, I have done this with Zach, and some of it was extremely powerful. That it is true. I didn't know it all myself, as oh, that's going on with me. And I will say one of the things, Zach, and I don't mean to cut you off, darling, but I was kind of tying into what you were saying there. You kept saying at one point, you're like, this depression. I was like, I'm not depressed. I don't experience depression. And then you asked a question to my body, and my body agreed with, yeah, because it's always just anger. Like, and I went, and you said, like, well, do you experience it in anger? Oh, well, yeah, I'm angry. I'm pissed off all the time. So I didn't know that. That's the thing. I experience it. I deliver it. It's the energy that I'll have. I call it my default emotion was anger, because in reality, though, as you got to point out to me, was really depression. And it was also stemming from feeling like everything was, people were failing, the expectations I had on myself and others, the failures, right? Then I would get depressed, and it came out as anger or frustration, right? And I was like, oh my goodness. I mean, I knew I had high expectations. I got to let those go. I never knew I was depressed, though, with it. And once I heard that, once we cleared it away, if that ever came back up later, 'cause, I mean, people are going to fail us, right? Things are going to happen. People are people, or something's going to be frustrating, right? It helped me let go of my expectations a lot better. And if something came up, because we replaced it with a knowing, I got to go, everything's fine. Like, that knowing was then there for me to go, everything's fine. You don't have to scream and yell at everybody, So you also helped my husband, by the way. So, and I'm joking about it now, but it's because when you said, no, this is really depression, it was as if I had to review all of my teen years, young adult year. I reviewed all of it and went, holy cow. You actually were extremely depressed, Courtney, but you just lived it in anger. So that's what I think your stuff does, is it's the awareness, the release, replacing it with the knowing, like you said. Now I can just go, yeah, everything's fine. People are people. I allow people to be people. It's that all that cleaning you did back in this conscious, all that cleaning, I'm much easier. I respond much easier to all beings now. Like, yeah, you do you. People are just people. I allow you to be who you are, Um, so that's what, when you were talking just then, that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. I appreciate you sharing that, Courtney. But yeah, that's a great example. Yeah, when you believe something, there's always that little inkling of doubt there. But when you know something, you know it, and there is no doubt attached to that. So,
Yeah, yeah, it's excellent. That's excellent. Well, ladies and gentlemen, beautiful stars, I'll ask you one more time, Zach, if you have anything that you want to end with. Because it is late here, folks. We're recording pretty late. That's why I can tell Zach and I are both like, oh, we're about to get squirrely here in a little bit if we don't stop. So Zach, is there anything you want to leave people with?
yeah, I guess I would just encourage people to, even if you don't, even if shadow cycle healing doesn't resonate with you, I would encourage you to find some modality, some means to work with your subconscious or your shadow, because it's very powerful work. And it really benefits you more than you would think in the long run. And I would just say, some people get scared and intimidated by shadow work. They think, oh my gosh, this is just going to rattle me to the core. And I would just say to that, it is mental work in that fashion is very similar to physical, like exercise work. You do have to be willing to get down and push through and bear through some things, and be a little bit uncomfortable at times. But as long as you know you're doing it in a safe environment with somebody that you trust, then ultimately you're going to come out the other side a better person. And it's something that if you choose to, you can continue to work on and grow with.
Zach, can I actually ask you just a couple more questions? Can somebody do it with you over the phone or Zoom, or does it have to be?
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be local. You can do it remotely. The shadow cycle sessions are a little long for Zoom because, well, they're just long for it. So it can be done over the phone, and generally when that's done, the practitioner or I myself is testing proxy on behalf of the client or the participant, and you're getting the answers that way. But and to be honest, I have yet to do shadow cycle healing remotely, although I know it can be done. I've done EC, emotion code, I've done that remotely, and it's the same operating principles. So I just haven't gotten the opportunity to do that yet.
Yeah.
But yes, it can be done remotely.
Okay. And I did want to ask you, because you brought up, not just people's fears of maybe shadow work per se, but you said work with the subconscious. In your opinion, is there a difference between like what you do and what like hypnotherapists do?
Yes, and it would depend on whatever the style of hypnotherapy is, but I believe hypnotherapy's focus area is the subconscious. So we're both tapping into the same thing. We're just going about it a little bit differently. One of the beauties of my system is that a person only needs to share what they're comfortable with. As long as they're acknowledging everything themselves and at terms with everything, it doesn't have to be vocalized to me. So if something is too personal or too painful to talk about, then we can just test on it. The whole person can hold it in their mind, and I don't have to be any the wiser. Because I was emailing with a lady today, and I said it really good. She was asking about a session, wanting more information, and I told her the same thing. I said, you can share as much or as little as you want. I said, really, the healing is between you and your body. And your body knows all the experiences you've been through. So as long as it knows and you consciously know, then if it's time to move ahead and you will it to, then it'll happen.
Yeah. And for me personally, I want to point out to people, you're not like going under in a deep meditation or a trance either.
Oh,
With hypnotherapy. You're there. You're participating. You're awake. So there's no funny business happening, folks. It is all pure, clean, healing going on. Let's end it on the note of, we've been talking about the body a lot. After we, worked with the subconscious, released a lot of these things, got to those core voids and healed, do we actually feel and receive the benefits within our tissues, within our bodies? Does that energy that's been trapped maybe in the tissues actually be released as well?
yes, definitely. And thank you. That's a great point, Courtney. Thank you for pointing out that during a shadow cycle healing or emotion code, everyone is conscious the entire time. And if someone were to get uncomfortable, I tell everybody, hey, if this isn't for you, or if it's just somewhere you can't go, tell me to stop. I'm not going to get offended. So, so yes, when we release these things, like I said, if what's stored in the mind is stored in the body, they're one and the same unit. So when we release these things, we're releasing them from both. And I have had clients immediately after a session. I had one lady say that the tension in her shoulders and neck had dissipated like 90%. I've had people report decreased pain following a session. So yeah, you can, because really when the stuff is stored in the body, it's a restrictive energy in the body, and it ultimately creates tissue tension, and it creates ischemia, which is lack of blood flow and oxygen to an area as well. And so that tension leads to pain and ultimately dis-ease, the body being out of ease. So when you are able to address these things and release them, now again, you've not only opened up capacity mentally here, you've opened it up in your body as well. So you could see increases in range of motion and stuff as well, pain-free range of motion and so on.
Yeah, this is beautiful. So I'm hearing, by doing the shadow cycle healing with Allied in Alchemy, Zach here, the potential outcome, depending on how many sessions and who you are as an individual, it's really the mind, the body, soul coming together and flowing with life instead of against it. You know what I mean? That's what I'm hearing of from the authentic self, and then the body being more mobile and moving. That's flowing with the natural energy of the natural energies, instead of fighting and ego.
Mhm.
This is all so lovely. Ladies and gentlemen, you beautiful stars, if you are local in the Chattanooga area or surrounding states, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, wherever, come on through April 29th to New Earth Energy Market. Zach will be there. And if you need him to, he'll show you how muscle testing works. He'll show you and talk to you about all this stuff. It is New Earth Energy Market, April 29th, Patriots Hall, Ringgold, Georgia. Zach is going to have a booth there. Zach is also going to partake in our New Earth Energy Market free online summit. It's a week-long summit, hopefully towards the end of August, that I will let you all know when you can sign up for that and hear more about the subconscious and the words that he was using, folks. All that change that goes on is very powerful. So Zach, any last final words, my dear?
No, I'm great, Courtney. Thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to the New Earth Energy Market Health Fair. So
Yeah,
it's going to be fun.
yeah, it will be. It'll be a lot of fun. And this year will be different than the last. And we just keep moving on and keeping on. That's what we do, don't we? Well, Zach, thank you. And you beautiful stars, keep shining out there. Know that you can heal the subconscious and the conscious with the body. Be a whole person. Keep shining, you lovely stars, and have a wonderful night.